Hello everyone, I'm Michaela. This is LycanhoodReads, and I'm coming at you with an update for the first time in basically 2 months now. So I had a really busy August and September for different reasons. I was house sitting two large dogs for most of July and August, and we live in a small apartment, so there wasn't a whole lot of room around the chaos to like make videos, and also I just wasn't reading very much these past 2 months, and then we were traveling a lot in September, so it's just been super busy. I wasn't having that much time to read anyway, and definitely not enough time to make videos, but I'm back now, and I wanted to give you a little update of what reading I did get done, and it's spooky season. I'm very excited about spooky season. I tried to start spooky season around like the first week of September, but that was ex-nayed. But now it's finally the end of September. October is just a few days away, and I am totally already in the spirit of Halloween. So I'm coming at you also with an October TBR, some recommendations, and hopefully another video where I do some spooky recommendations specifically. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. We're going to call this the August-September wrap-up, because again, I didn't read very many books these last couple months. So first things first, I finally finished American Hippo. It was the first book I finished in August, and so if I haven't talked about American Hippo before, I can't remember. It's actually a combination of two or three novellas written by Sarah Galley. So she was writing these novellas and getting them published mostly, I believe, in magazines or anthologies. But she wrote enough about these same characters, and it kind of followed a rough overall narrative. So they combined it together in one book. The very first novella is called River of Tea. And this is a super cool concept that I was very excited to read, because it just sounds crazy. It's based on this historical, like Wild West time period, and apparently at some point in American history, it was actually proposed that hippos be brought over from Africa and South America to be used as farm animals, like for meat, but also for beasts of labor, like riding them and pulling carts and stuff. That was an actual proposition that happened once. So Sarah Galley reimagines the American West if that had actually happened, and if hippos had become the main source of not only meat but like transportation and just this huge part of the American economic culture, essentially. So in this world, hippos have in many ways replaced horses and cows as well. So it's cowboy riding hippos is what we're dealing with in these books, and it's a very queer, fast-paced, like gang of misfits heist story sort of deal. So they're outlaws, they ride hippos. What more do you need to know? I was instantly intrigued. I needed to know more. So I read this book towards the end of July and the beginning of August. I love some of the art that's included as well. It's not very long, and like I said, it's split up into multiple novellas, so you can take breaks in between if you want. But in general, just a fun, interesting, really weird book. I recommend it. Got around to reading Winter's Orbit. You guys may or may not remember that I had this on my list to buy back when it came out in February of 2020. But something came up in February. I can't really remember the details, but I wasn't able to buy or pre-order a new book that month. So I ended up skipping Winter's Orbit, and then I just sort of lost hype for it as the year went on. However, it came up on sale on my Audible books for Amazon, and it came up on sale, so I went ahead and snatched it up. It is a queer YA new adult romance in space sci-fi. It's space gaze. I say YA new adult, but I should probably put in some clarification there. It is definitely new adult. Like, there are adult themes. There's sexuality, sexual content, cursing, that sort of thing. So I definitely put like a PG-13 maybe higher than that rating on it. However, the thing about this book is that it is written. I believe the book began as a fan fiction, or as some type of fan fiction, and then over time it was evolved into a story of its own, an original story. But because of that, it has a lot of fan fiction tropes, and a lot of the writing comes through as very fan fiction-esque. And I don't say that as a put down. I love fan fiction. I've written fan fiction myself, but if you've read fan fiction, you probably know what I mean. It's something about the writing is very obvious. That's where it's coming from, that's sort of the realm it's being pulled from, as well as the story itself, the characters, and a lot of the tropes that go into it. It's one of those, let me see, what is it, like arranged marriage, miscommunication, shenanigans, really serious type meets very goofy kind of screw up type romance, and yeah, so this is just, I enjoyed it, but it was very trope heavy. If you're not into that, then you're probably not going to like this book. But also, it was very politically heavy, and that was actually the thing that bothered me more so than the tropes. I was down for the like fanficky, wacky romance tropes, but the politics was hard for me to follow. I was reading it on audiobook again, and sometimes that can make things a little more murky. But in general, I felt that the politics were kind of overbearing in this story almost. I would have preferred more of the romance and less of the politics. But it got a little confusing, and most of the time I just didn't care about that, and I just kind of wanted to get back to the actual romance that was happening. And if you're wondering about sci-fi elements, it takes place in like a futuristic space, alternate space sci-fi society. Kind of generic in that way, really, but it's not fleshed out very well. The world building, while the politics is very fleshed out, I would say the world building is not. Like, when I try to picture where this book takes place, I have a difficult time picturing it, just because it's not a super vivid setting. So there are sci-fi elements. It takes place in like a futuristic sci-fi space society, but other than that, the sci-fi elements are just kind of inconsequential to the story, I would say. But overall, not a bad book at all. I'm always here for the representation, of course. And we've got these two beautiful covers that I'm flipping through. I'm not sure which one, if maybe one is UK and the other is American. They're both very pretty. One looks a little more YA than the other, but I do want to clarify that this is not a YA book. The characters are adults, and there is adult content. So if I had to rate it, and I'm not really crazy about star ratings, but if I had to rate it, I'd give it like a 2.5 or like 2.7. But that's not really how I enjoy doing reviews anyway. But it's enjoyable, pretty quick read. Just be aware that it's not like gonna be mind-blowingly original or anything. Let's see. Next up, I read Fugitive Telemetry. That's, I believe, book 7 in the Murderbot Diaries. You might remember that I got really caught up in the Murderbot Diaries back in June. Kind of took me by surprise, and I binge read all of it, essentially, except for this one, which was the newest one. And the reason I was hesitant to read this one is because it's a prequel. So it takes place before, let me make sure I'm getting this right. It takes place before Network Effect, which is the first full-length novella in the series. First full-length novel in the series. And I just, wasn't excited for a prequel because I was so happy with where the series had left off and, what was going to come next that I wasn't interested in going backwards. And that's and when I did finally get around to reading it in August, that's still how I felt, basically. I read it, and it was okay. Murderbot was there, and I always enjoy spending time with Murderbot. And his friends, but their friends, I kind of skip around with their pronouns, which I guess is kind of how it's intended. They don't really have a gender, but anyway, this book was fine. I enjoyed spending time with Murderbot, but the plot, I just wasn't invested in it because I already knew that everything was gonna be alright, and it was sort of separate. It wasn't really about our people, the normal cast of characters for Murderbot the way the stories usually are. This one's just sort of out of left field, and it was a prequel, and I'm not crazy about prequels most of the time anyway. So yeah, this was a Murderbot book. It was okay, but if you can find it like on sale or online or something, I wouldn't recommend spending the full like $10 or $12 on it, because it is super short and it's not really adding much to the overall Murderbot story. So I don't have a picture, but I read She Who Became the Sun, and this was actually my favorite book that I read in August. It came out in June of this year, I believe, and it is what's the best way to describe it? A queer fantasy historical romance mashup, Asian historical romance mashup. So it is, all year long it was being described as Mulan, which, yeah, Mulan meets like...
A few moments later.
I don't remember, just like a Mulan retelling of some kind, which is of course immediately grabbed my attention, because I love Mulan to death, and that movie, the Disney movie that came out last year, was pretty disappointing. So that was a total trigger for me. I was starved for something Mulan, and that was how that one was described, as like a darker adult version of, you know, Mulan. And I really ended up liking it. I don't disagree with the Mulan comparison, but it's so much more than that, and it's silly to narrow it down to that, because it's its own story separate from that. It is a historical fantasy that takes place in China. It's sort of like a retelling of some Chinese military history, but it's not a very action-heavy, military-heavy book. The author is not really interested in like battles or, you know, blood or violence or any of that. They're much more interested in the political maneuvering and scheming that happens in the higher ranks of these military confrontations. And I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but she made it very exciting. And the main character just... It's not that I love the main character, but they are very interesting. The way that they have this like pull yourself by your bootstraps sort of mentality, and just the determination with which they live their life is incredible. And there are two main characters really, and it doesn't really tell you that on the book jacket, or in the like blurb, but there are two main characters, and it's actually the one that the story doesn't focus on the most, that I found the most interesting. He kind of came out of left field for me and really stole the show. Sorry, there's a cat meowing. Ignore that. Sherwood, shut up. Stop meowing. Come here. Come here. Come on. There she is. This is Sherwood, everyone. I know you guys have seen Spencer in a lot of my videos, but this is Sherwood. She is the baby. She's only about 2 years old, and she gets lost in the house sometimes. Like she forgets that we're here, or like she can't find us or something, and starts meowing like she's alone. And you have to call her name to let her know she's not by herself. Yeah, that's her. Anyway, what was I talking about? She Who Became the Sun. Highly recommend it. Like I said, it was my favorite read of August. It's one of my favorite reads of the year. It didn't disappoint me. It was very different than what I had been expecting it to be all year, as an anticipated read, but it was different in a good way, in a surprising way, and I still ended up really enjoying it. It's part of what some people on like Bookstagram are calling the Sapphic trifecta of this year, I think, and that consists of She Who Became the Sun, the Jasmine Throne, which I haven't read yet, and what was the other one? We'll revisit this. Anyway. After She Who Became the Sun, I attempted to finish the Broken Earth trilogy. I don't know how much I've really talked about this before, but I have read the first two books in the Broken Earth trilogy, and this is a series by N.K. Jemisin that is extremely hyped. It is a sci-fi fantasy darling, and has been for the last couple of years. She's won a ton of awards for it. Each book is acclaimed. BookTube won't stop talking about it. Critics won't stop talking about it. And I don't really like it that much. I don't. The 5th season was pretty good. I liked it. I didn't like everything about it, but I came out of it intrigued. Because it's a really cool world, and like no doubt, I don't think anyone can deny N.K. Jemisin like built a really incredible world, and at the time it just felt so different from any other sci-fi that was coming out or had ever come out or has come out since then. Like it's just so unique, hard to ignore it. But there are some elements to her story that are not for everyone, are not for me. Like a large part of the story takes place in second person perspective, which I just cannot stand most of the time. And I think it has to be done, it should only be done when absolutely necessary, when there's no other way to tell that story. And I think Harrow the Ninth, which came out last year, is a great example of how you're using second person for a very specific reason, for a very specific amount of time, and how it really pays off in the end in terms of reading experience. And I just never got that from the 5th season or the Obelisk Gate. The payoff didn't feel big enough or warranted enough or emotional enough for me to have suffered through the second person perspective. And maybe that's just me being picky or baby, but I don't care. I didn't find it enjoyable. I didn't like reading it. Anyway, so yeah, the Broken Earth trilogy has been a struggle for me. There's a picture of it. But regardless, I'm very determined to finish series that I start or finish books that I start, and I'm trying to be better about that. I'm trying to be more open to DNFing things and not wasting my time if I'm not enjoying something, because that's the whole point of reading, is to learn or to enjoy. So I tried to read The Stone Sky in August. I tried really hard on audiobook, and I got about 84% of the way through it, and I could not finish it, guys. Could not finish it. So yeah, ended up DNFing the third one. I mean, I spent so much time reading the first two, and it seems silly not to finish the series, but I just was 84% through, and I didn't care. Like, all this stuff was kind of starting to come to a head, and I had barely been paying attention for most of the book, because the writing style isn't particularly engaging, and I just didn't care. I didn't care about the characters, I didn't care what was going to happen, so I stopped. I was like, there's nothing wrong with stopping. There's nothing to stop me from stopping, so I'm just gonna. So about 84%, if I'm remembering correctly, and yeah, and then I googled how it ended, and okay, yeah, fine. So yeah, not a huge fan. Now finally having finished the whole trilogy, I'm comfortable saying that this trilogy is not for me. I understand why it's so hyped up and why it's such a big deal, just because of how unique it is, but not for me. I don't know if I'm going to like N.K. Jemisin's other writing. I haven't read anything else by her, even though I've thought about it. But this is by far the premise that sounds the most interesting, and I didn't like it. So I'm not sure if I'll try something else by her. Especially if she comes out, I'm sure she's not anywhere near stopping. So maybe one day I'll try something else. But right now, I'm just not interested. Disappointed. Okay, next, talking about, on a happier note, talking about something I actually love. So I actually got a jump start on spooky season. I wanted to read a lot. I wanted to try reading like queer horror. That's something I'm trying to get into with film as well, because horror has never been my favorite genre. It's not something I hate, but I just haven't, I don't tend to like horror movies in the traditional sense. I haven't read a lot of horror books. But it's something I'm trying to almost study more and just learn more about and find what I can enjoy about it. So I went ahead and jumped on spooky season early, and one of the books I read in September is this one. It's called Meddling Kids, and it is a spoof on like an adult, queer, wacky, darker Scooby-Doo, essentially. and it's by Edgar Carrero, I think is how you say his name, and he has a couple of other books out as well that all seem equally as wacky and strange in a dark, semi-horror way. Um, this book I can't remember how I came across this book honestly, but look at this cover, it's so good. It's called Meddling Kids, and so essentially what it is about is a Scooby-Doo gang, a Scooby-Doo-esque gang, or like something like the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew kind of deal. They're all grown up now, and so as adults they have to return to the town where they used to solve mysteries as children, and they had to return and kind of solve like one last mystery, like the one that got away, the one that broke up the group to begin with, sort of deal. And they have a dog. It's so like they had to come back, and it's queer, and there's tension, and old crushes and old secrets come out, and it's so fun. And they had to solve this one last mystery. I really enjoyed it. It's not like mind blowing or anything, but it's funny and nostalgic, and look how cool the cover is. And there's a dog that, like a Scooby-Doo-esque dog, it doesn't talk or anything, but they treat it like it talks. I don't know, it's so much fun. I really just, with everything going on in my own personal life and in the world, I just need something fun a lot of the time, and that's what I've been craving for like the last several months. And this definitely fulfilled the expectation. I wanted to show you another cover because it has two really fantastic covers. That's another one. I love both the cover designs. I think even though I like the color scheme of this one more, I think this cover more accurately reflects like the story and sort of the vibe of the book. But yeah, so if you're wondering like what kind of sci-fi elements it has, it definitely does have sci-fi spooky elements. It's more Lovecraftian than anything. So it's not just a man in a mask, right? It's like a primordial monster, and ghosts and masterminds and whatnot. It's so good. Read it. It's perfect for spooky season, for Halloween season. It hits that nostalgia spot, and yeah, I can't recommend it highly enough. I loved it. Not mind blowing in the traditional sense, but it's probably just what you need. It's definitely just what I needed at the time. Let's see. I also read She's Too Pretty to Burn, which was one of my anticipated releases from earlier this year. Kind of like Winter's Orbit, something interfered with me pre-ordering it. Probably just money was tight or something, and I didn't get to pre-order it. But I finally got around to it in this later half of the year, and it kind of fits the spooky bill as well. It's not like supernatural or anything like that, but it is a thriller. A and again, I hesitate to say YA. It's about teenagers, like 17-year-olds, but it has adult themes like sex, violence, emotional abuse, emotional manipulation. So yeah, definitely on the older side of YA, if not just in new adult. She's Too Pretty to Burn, but it is Sapphic. Meddling Kids, I should mention as well, has a Sapphic element to it, and this one has a Sapphic romance to two female main characters in dual perspectives. And yeah, I don't want to say too much more about it because it's a thriller, so lots of twists and turns. But it's basically just like summer romance gone awry in some way or another. It's pretty cute though. It's like a himbo girl meets artistic photographer type. I enjoyed it. It wasn't fantastic. Thriller's not really my favorite genre. I don't read a lot of thrillers, but I liked it. I read it pretty quickly, and I had fun with it. No complaints. Following that spooky vibe, I also read The Drowning Girl, and that is by Caitlin R. Kiernan, I believe is how you say her name. And this is an author that I'm familiar with because of the Alabaster graphic novel series, which is also a supernatural, like, monster hunting graphic novel. If you haven't read about it, or if you haven't read it, you should. I highly recommend it. I might put it in my spooky recommendation videos because I've been a fan for years. But I've never read any of her prose. And this is one of her more famous books. This was published, I believe, in 2012, so I will go ahead and put a warning that it uses some terms and some ideas that maybe people aren't as comfortable with now, specifically when it comes to like trans individuals and schizophrenic or like just mental illness in general. Some things might not be as up to date as we would like, but I really enjoyed this. It's spooky. It's about a schizophrenic girl that is essentially writing a memoir about this time in her life where things got really weird. And she has difficulty understanding what is real and what isn't. And it's the best way to describe it is that it's a ghost story where you're not sure if it was real or if it was just all in your head. The writing style is probably not for everyone. It's very disjointed, kind of stream of consciousness sort of stuff. But if you can get through it, it is a very enjoyable story, I think. It's got a sapphic romance. It's got trans rep. It's got a lot of stuff about mental illness, schizophrenia in particular, but also depression and anxiety. And it also has supernatural elements leaning towards like European grim fairy tale sort of mythology. And really just kind of a diamond in the rough, I think this one is. It is kind of dated again, 2012, but I had never heard of it other than just knowing this author. I'd never heard anyone talk about it on BookTube or anything, so I think maybe this one's kind of coming out of left field, and I'm sure there are people out there that would really enjoy it. I know that I did. Gonna wrap it up with Surrender Your Sons. Get a good look there. I love this cover, right? This cover totally drew me in. It's by Adam Sass. So I've been on a kick where I wanted to read more own voices, queer rep in particular. Earlier in the video I talked about reading Winter's Orbit, and that just made me even more aware that a lot of the male-on-male gay fiction that I read is written by women, and how that has its own whole problematic context. I don't want to get into all that controversy right now, but suffice it to say, I'm trying to read more own voices rep, especially for queer communities, and this is one of them. And I love this cover. So I was sort of led to believe that this was an adult thriller, or at least a new adult thriller. However, I ended up DNFing it right here at the end of September because it's heavily leaning towards YA. In the writing style, the characters are teenagers, which is fine, but it's not what I wanted. It's not what I went in expecting, and the pacing for this book just is not working for me at all. The basic premise is it's about a gay conversion camp. A kid that is shipped off to a gay conversion camp by his overly religious mother, and even though that's sinister enough all by itself, there's also a like murder mystery from his past, and he's trying to figure out he's trying to solve this mystery while being stuck on the conversion camp on some like island in Costa Rica. I don't know. It's pretty wild, but the pacing's just not working for me at all. Most of the book takes place on his first day of camp, and so much happens on that first day that I'm just like, nothing about it felt genuine to me, and I've been struggling to read lately anyway, so I might as well not read something that I'm not enjoying. So that's going to be my wrap up for September. September and August. Total for both months, I finished 7 books, and I DNF'd 2 books, having read over 50% of both of them. So I'm doing pretty good. You could say I read 7, or you could say I read 9. It doesn't really matter. But that was my August and September wrap up. I'll be coming back at you soon with a October TBR and a spooky recommendations video, spooky fall, I don't know, but it's gonna be gay, so I'll see you soon.